Hi everyone, I'm Robin Grabfelder. Today is day 3 of our 2022 year ahead panel discussions. Today, I would like to introduce Kim Marie. She is an evolutionary astrologer, a deep memory process practitioner, and the managing director of the Evolutionary Astrology Network's astrology course. Kim Marie will introduce the rest of the panel and tell you about today's topics.
All right, thank you, Robin. Hello, everybody. I reside in the Black Hills of South Dakota, in the mountains, which I absolutely love. And I have practiced evolutionary astrology almost 4 decades. And so I will introduce each panelist, and if you will then unmute yourself, give a little bit of your background. After we all introduce ourselves, then I'll briefly tell everybody what our topics are going to be today. So Michael Pinchera, I see that you are unmuted. So Michael, hello. Would you give us a little introduction on yourself?
Okay. My name is Michael, and I live here in Cuenca, Ecuador. I've been here for almost 8 years. I've studied astrology since '77, came across Jeffrey's first book when it came out in '81, and studied that. And because of, I've been a Waldorf teacher for a lot of years, and that took most of my time. And I finally took up studying with Jeffrey in '97, and then life changes and stuff for everybody. And then I completed my certification with Kim Marie. And so yes, I work with evolutionary astrology, and I'm incorporating it now with biography work and arts and movement in retreats and workshops.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. Michaela, hello. Would you please introduce yourself for us? You're unmute, yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michaela, and I'm living at the moment in southwest France, Aquitaine, and a watermill, so it's appropriate. I'm a Pisces rising. I started to learn astrology formally in the 90s with the Faculty of Astrology in London, and then I went on to the Center for Psychological Astrology with Liz Green and Erin and everybody. So I took up Jungian astrology, really, which is what they practiced. And then I was introduced to evolutionary astrology by Jeffrey's books, and it goes very well with Jungian astrology. It sort of merges with it. So then I found myself with the evolutionary astrology group, which is fantastic. I'm loving it. So that's me.
Thank you, Michaela. And I will just say, panelists, if you want to mute yourself when you're not speaking, you can. Thank you very much. We'll just go back and forth with mute, unmute. Next, I'm going to introduce Marie O'Neill. So hello, Marie. Would you unmute and tell us about yourself? You're muted, Marie. Do you know how to unmute?
Yeah, I have it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Marie O'Neill, and I am an evolutionary astrologer, of course. My training in evolutionary astrology came through the Stephen Forrest Apprenticeship Program. I started studying with Stephen back in 2011. Before that, I read lots of books on astrology, but never really got the certification until I went through the Stephen Forrest AP program. I'm also a trained esoteric astrologist through Alan Oken's school, well, basically through training with Alan Oken. My work now is done through the FCEA, which is the Forrest Center of Evolutionary Astrology. I'm a tutor for that school, and I run Padma Life Coaching here in Santa Rosa, California, where I work with people to heal their emotional trauma. So.
Thank you, Marie.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it. And next we have Eric Pride. Eric, would you unmute and introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Pride, and as usual, I'm the oddball out. So I'm not an evolutionary astrologer. I'm a predictive astrologer. I've been studying for about 18 years. I've studied with a number of schools. I do hold a certificate in horary from the Astrological Institute of Research, and I've lectured and taught all over the globe. So,
Where are you from, Eric?
oh, sorry, I'm from Pennsylvania, just outside
Okay.
of Philly.
All right, thank you, thank you. All right, you have now met our panelists, and so today we are going to look at more topics of 2022. And so I'm going to give you a brief list, and we may include other subjects. Those of you who are listening live, if there's something you have a question on, you would be welcome to type it into the chat panel, and one of us astrologers up and bring it into the group. And so we are going to look at the fact that through the first 4 months of 2022, we're going to have all of the planets, with the exception of the moon, we're going to have all of the planets on one side of the nodal axis. And so we will just weave back and forth with how each of us look at that. We are also going to look at the eclipses that are happening this year. I think our first day panel looked at the nodal axis shifting into Taurus, Scorpio. So we'll add on to that through these eclipses. We're also going to look at the fact that later this year, Mars is going to conjunct the North Node in Uranus. We're going to have, again, Mars, Uranus, and the North Node all together late July, early August. And so we will give some of our comments on that whole subject as well. And every so often, depending on what our topic is, I will put some screens up on the slide. We will take them down so that you can see all of us panelists interacting with each other. And we're just going to have a free flow discussion on everything. And so the first topic that we had brought up was the fact that all of the planets are just really kind of squeezed together right now. And as a matter of fact, once we had the Jupiter, Saturn conjunctions with Pluto in 2020, we now have, again, all of the outer planets sandwiched between Pluto and Uranus. Jupiter will move ahead of Uranus in 2024. So we've got literally 4 years of all of these planets just kind of squished right in together. And so I'm going to put up a slide on the screen right now, and I'm going to invite any of our panelists who would like to speak to show up, but hold on just a second. I put a few together for you. I'm going to start here for us. All right, so please bear with me as I get here. Whoops, wrong. Whoops, sorry. I'm trying to go specifically to that slide. There we go. So here's some dates for you, but just before that, in evolutionary astrology, I'm watching most astrologers now start to work with a 0 to 360 cycle in regards to aspects. Evolutionary astrology through the Jeffrey Wolf Green method started with this when I found it back in the 1980s. And for those of you who didn't know this, after those first quarter squares that we had 7 times in 2012 to 15, Uranus made the biseptile aspect to Pluto 7 times. We're just getting off of that. And as a matter of fact, they're still only 104 degrees from each other. And so that's where that sandwich is between these planets. Briefly, here were the dates and degrees. We won't have to take too much time with that. Okay, sorry, I'm just guessing how we're going to go through slides today. So here's the slide for the spring equinox. That's in the middle of these first 4 months, in which, as you can see on your screen, everything is sandwiched in between not only the half of the nodes, half the circle, but also sandwiched in between Uranus and Pluto as well. And so I would like to now just invite our panelists, if you want, to unmute yourself and springboard us off some of the comments on what we can expect through this tight conglomeration of all of the planets in the skies. We can just free flow, go in an order, however you would like to do it. Unmute whoever would like to go first.
So I'll break the ice. My Mercury is in Aries, and I have a Leo rising, so I have no problem speaking up. This particular alignment is fascinating in mundane astrology. If you think of global consciousness and trends, the fact that it sits on one half of the chart, we think of that kind of classic bowl, it's me against the world kind of energy. And I think this is something that we are still going to continue to see with this. It's not just an individual that's going to be born with this type of placement, but the world as a whole it's me against the world, it's me against you, it's us versus them is a very prominent theme when we have one side of the chart. I think this is going to be particularly challenging when we consider that so much of the world is kind of diametrically opposed to one another for a lot of different reasons that we don't need to bring up here. But the fact that it's sandwiched between Uranus and Pluto, this is a very uncomfortable position. It's almost like the planets are being kind of corralled together and kind of forced to share space that they may not normally like to, where Uranus, that kind of shock and excitement, and Pluto, that very kind of demanding, destructive force, are kind of becoming gatekeepers to the rest of the world. And this feels a lot like a tempest in a pot of tea that's getting ready to kind of boil over. And I think that we're going to be feeling that pressure of opposition with one another globally until these planets break free from there. So those are my initial observations on this.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Would someone else like to speak?
Sure, I'll go ahead. I agree with what you have just said. And when I look at this configuration, I'm also looking at it in, say, a locomotive stance. So we're looking at Pluto as the leader. If you are, which of course in our chart in America, with it being set in Washington, is 8th house. I'm sorry, is that, yeah, 8th house. So, when we look at Pluto in the 8th house, of course, it's at home there. It's very comfortable. So, it's the leader, and it's of asking us and pushing us to dive deep, to go into the underworld. It's, as a matter of fact, we don't have a choice. This is what we will do. And because we will get transformation, and all of the other planets there are following suit and helping. This is, I believe that this is a directive basically for humanity, basically, to go into the underworld. I believe that's where we're going anyway, and we're in the descent there. And looking at this configuration, it's headed, Pluto, of course, is pushing us towards that south node in Scorpio, which, of course, Pluto rules Scorpio. So it's pushing us to that south node, which is about the south node in evolutionary astrology is, of course, where our past is. It's where we need to heal. And with Scorpio, Scorpio is famous or known for being able to go beneath the surface. So our shadow, we're being asked to do shadow work. As a matter of fact, we have been being asked to do the shadow work since Pluto entered into Capricorn in 2008. Now Pluto is at the late degrees, and looking at this particular configuration, it's extremely powerful in the later degrees. Not that it's not powerful in the earlier degrees, but This is where we are being pushed
Thank you,
or
Marie.
pulled.
Both. Thank you. Michael, any comments on this conglomeration or squeeze of planets all together? Unmute, please, Michael. Michael, unmute.
Need to unmute,
Thank you.
yes. Yes, thank you. Before the call, I was telling Susan and Robin that for a January EA talk, I was working on this topic, an aspect of this topic, mainly focusing on the lunar axis and the T-squares coming up this year. So, I really appreciate what Marie was talking about. It's really true because, the South Node, it's applying to Pluto, or Pluto's applying to the South Node. And this shows, this proves of what Marie was saying, that, the shadow work, this is where everything has to be integrated. This is the integration point, it's really being called for. So everything from the past, especially, you can say in the world, of course, but in the United States, it's sort of like the great exemplar of this at this time with its with its Pluto return. We have the Pluto in Capricorn. It's really about the destruction, really, of what's rigidified and untrue in the defining of self, the maintaining of identity, and the security gained by the control of self, control of others, and what it takes to the security that you arrive at from maintaining that kind of identity. Now, keeping in mind the Pluto polarity point in Cancer, it's really about keeping the integrity of self. Okay, and all that one does as an individual, group, or a nation, and Cancer's establishing that, maintaining that, being true to oneself. And so you have this lunar axis, which magnifies it, I guess you could say. So the lunar self node in Sagittarius, it's about it really points to what's already been established, excuse me, in both truth and lies. Yeah. And the North Node in Gemini will indicate the intentions to communicate the truth of being. And this is a little bit later on in this slide. But the axis of this, with going back to the axis with being in Scorpio and Taurus, it's about what is being transformed and what needs transforming and what needs to be established in the North Node, what is, the intentions and aspirations. This is sort of like the pivot, the balancing level of which the whole, everybody is balancing upon at this time. So I just want to stop there and really say that the shadow work is really important here.
Thank you, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Michaela, would you?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And what I had been thinking that now it's interesting because we're at the solstice. We've just passed the winter solstice, and that's called the midnight sun. I've mentioned that before. The black sun, it's the darkest point, as we know, and then it builds to the light. So it's like the alchemical stages. It's called the Negrido, in psychology. So it's very much, the chart, all the charts coming up with the Taurus Pluto, Taurus, Scorpio emphasis for the nodes, and then the series of eclipses and the planetary placements. They are, like everyone just said, it's like shadow work. It's like alchemy. I wrote something here. It's like we're in the fourth house at the moment of the chart. We're in the great wheel. We're at the IC, the womb, the matrix, the hermetic vessel from which the miraculous stone is to be born. And like in the belly of the whale, and that's how it feels, awaiting the collective resurrection. And so the first stage of the work is the blackening, which is called an alchemy, and it's symbolized by the black sun, and it's the confrontation with the shadow. And that's where we now find ourselves. And this process is in time and tune with the turning of the Piscean age into the Aquarian. This being the end of the Piscean ages of Pisces, we are required to, descend into the underworld, as Marie and Michael and everyone just said, Eric. So yeah, I agree with all of that. It's deep. Yeah, we're going down, maybe. But we've got to go.
Yeah, the nodal axis moving into the fixed quadrant of the zodiac, I think can have the danger, maybe not a danger, the tendency might be that we become entrenched in our patterns, in our beliefs. And, the true intent of all the Pluto Scorpio energy is metamorphosis. And so how well can we reach over to that Taurian self-reliance, especially inwardly? I think that's a lot of what Uranus is trying to teach us through its passage there. That inner self-reliance that allows us to do those metamorphic leaps that need to be taken in our world. I would point out that for our listeners, that wherever you may have Aquarius, Pisces, Aries in your chart, that's that middle area sandwiched in between the nodes and Uranus, Pluto. And that's a concentration of energy in your chart over the next 3 months, where you are literally going to be having to reach for that metamorphosis to whatever degree those signs, houses, natal planets are asking you to concentrate yourself. And also, as I was looking at this over the last couple of days and thinking, oh my gosh, we are going to have, a mini generation of souls, not only just within these first 4 months of 22, but as we expressed earlier, between 2020 and 24, this concentration of planets. We have a group of souls coming in that are going to have areas of their soul reflected through the chart, and just 100 degrees, less than a third of the chart, that they're going to be concentrating on for a lifetime. And if you kind of think about that over time, imagine this mini group of souls, although there's going to be a few people, a large amount of people, think about what they're going to be doing on the planet in their various ways of really trying to help, all of us metamorphose through the changing of the ages, through being able to interact with the planet in natural ways again. I had shown you the screen, and I will go back to this here we go. That biseptile aspect, it is the harmonics of the number 7. And in evolutionary astrology, that can have what we call an element of fate. And it's realigning on our soul's journey. And we're doing it individually, we're doing it collectively. And so we're still within that energy of having what appears to be fated events happen on planet Earth that will hopefully be allowing us to, again, realign in harmony with the planet and nature as we go along through time, through this next year, through these next few years of between 2023 and 26, all right? Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, all change signs. And within that, we have Saturn changing signs. We have Jupiter doing it every year. So those traditional outer planets are really going to be shaking a lot of things up and activating a lot of things. And so how are each of you on an individual basis being asked to realign with your own soul's natural energies, goals, desires, as you are participating on planet Earth and being a part of how we are doing this on a huge collective level? So as any other comments come up, we can go back and forth between our subjects however we want to. I think it is kind of natural for us to put a little bit of energy now into perhaps Uranus, the other side of this concentration of planets. And, you know, perhaps you may have some comments on what you think about Uranus and Taurus. I've joked that I think it's one big, long climate event over the next 7 years. I'm from the Northern Plains. I lived through a tornado coming through our family farm when I was about 8, 9 years old. I have very, very healthy respect for Mother Nature. I would not recommend that to anybody. My hearts go out to everyone, anywhere who is experiencing climate events. I also think one of the main themes of Uranus and Taurus, besides previously speaking about, you know, the inner self-reliance when the outer rug gets ripped away, but Uranus and Taurus is one of the resource signs, be it the physical earth with climate events or the physical resources that help us with food, clothing, and shelter. And so those resources to survive and flourish, of course, will bring up the whole issue of what we will call money and finances. And I think this is part of Uranus in Taurus as well. And let's see if I bounced my slides together correctly. Oh, Uranus and Taurus, cryptocurrency, anybody? I would just like to invite the panel to speak a few minutes of your perception of Uranus's transit through Taurus and what it means for you on both an individual and a collective level. And I'd like to maybe lay some of that groundwork for all of us, including our listeners, and then we'll kind of make it specific to some of the eclipses we're going to see in 2022. Panelists, do you want to skip order? Would you like to continue in the same order? How do each of you feel comfortable? Maybe Eric wants to speak up. We'll
I can do that. I can certainly do that. So I have to completely agree with you on Uranus and Taurus. I wrote an article several years ago about it kind of being like a cattle prod to the bull of Taurus that is revolutionizing, you know, not only our individual values, but and our personal resources, but the collective resources as well. So I'm completely 110% on board with what you're saying and what we're seeing in terms of, you know, climate change and climate awareness and everything that's going on with, you know, the technological base of of money, you know, the Uranus technology, cryptocurrencies, you know, specifically as you've got up here on the screen. I think that we are reaching a very critical point in this, especially as it comes to the North Node, and we have Mars there together, because we kind of have this fated point of destiny, and then Mars comes in as the trigger and then activates it. So if you think of a planet in a sign as like a ripple of energy, we get those double ripples when we've got other things that are lined up. And I think that this year specifically, that is going to be something that individually, I know that in my own personal life, that's something I'm wrestling with. I'm expecting a child literally any day now. I could get a call and have to leave. So they're going to have this collection of planets, that we were talking about. But, as a whole, what's important to us as society? Is it money? Is it experiences? Is it caring about the universe? Should we, or caring about the world? All just huge, very existential things that we're wrestling with, and Uranus is certainly kind of helping kind of push that agenda that the universe, I think, has forward as part of what's keeping everything together. But I think it's going to really start to come to a head here when Mars and the North Node come into play. I think that it's interesting that this is occurring, and I hate to make this about the US, but during the US's Pluto return, also in an Earth sign where it's rules the US's money and debt. And then we have the equinox chart in the 8th house in DC. It's debt again. I know that an announcement was just made a couple hours ago about student loan debt being put on hold again until March or April. I can't quite remember. And I think that that's part of how we're learning to restructure what we're putting our money towards as a country, as a society, and what we think is important. And I think it should be more, I think it needs to be more Taurian, needs to be more environmentally friendly and conscious. But and I think that after a lot of very difficult growing pains, we will eventually get there. But I think it's exciting to be part of this time where things are in flux.
Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Miss Marie?
Yes. Thank you. Oh my goodness, Eric, I'm on board with what you have just said. Now, I am not, of course, an expert in cryptocurrency. However, I have read some of the articles pertaining to it. When I look at Uranus and Taurus, I have to look at it, of course, from the standpoint of what is Uranus asking us to do when he or it is in the sign of the bull. And when we look at the bull, what is the bull? The bull is a male cow. And the bull has these two horns, of course. When I look at Taurus and I look at it from its highest perspective, what it is giving us, the bull has a third eye. And in esoteric astrology, when the eye is illumined, all is light. So when I look at that and I look at Uranus, of course, the god of lightning bolts and earthquakes, this is what Uranus is helping us to shed light on what our reality is, how we are to work with each other. Because remember, Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is the planet of relating, of relationships. So what is our relationship to the earth? What is our relationship to our neighbor? What is our relationship to food, to nature? How is it that we as humans, for the most part, don't realize that we are a part of nature and not separate from it? So Uranus, I see Uranus and Taurus coming in and giving us those lightning bolts, those earth changes, the food changes, all of the electricity that we need to illumine, to shed light on reality and what it really is. And of course, we have a lot of healing to do. And in Taurus, that of course means coming back into the body. We cannot heal if we're out of the body. So I also see the earth changes that we are going through, the cryptocurrency and all of that, as a way of helping us to see reality as it really is, and helping us to see ourselves as nature, as not just the individual, but as a group. Now, I know, anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that. Yeah.
Thank you, Marie. Michael, any comments on Uranus and Taurus
Yeah,
and or?
yeah, a little bit. Taurus dealing with, the Venusian way of defining what one's values are, okay, in all levels of being. So this is really being questioned up in upheaval on many levels. With cryptocurrency, more of an expert at it than I am, but we are involved with it, so I have a little bit of knowledge. What I can say is that something very Uranian is involved here, especially with, not only because it's electronic and it's it's different from the usual system, but the decentralized cryptocurrencies is something like very different from the usual models of money. Okay, and this is bringing in more of the Uranian Aquarian impulse of something more humanitarian, equality, where people really have they can determine how the money system is working. So as far as Venusian values, it's totally an upheaval. And I'm looking at your slide, Kim Marie, at the end there, after saying US will enter the cryptocurrency market, the next battlefield between democratic and autocratic countries. I think that, there's truth in that. And I also would go a little bit further and say, it's already here in existence, and it's an upheaval in society. It's divisiveness is happening, has been happening. And, there's already talk here and there, and even within the US military about civil war, and whether that happens or not, the very fact that these divisions, which really has basically it's a divisiveness of values. So that's what I have to say about it.
Thank you, Michael. Good comment. Miss Michaela?
Well, Uranus is about instability, and obviously Taurus, Venus, money system. So I think there's a lot of suspicion about systems, particularly when you've got nothing to hold on to, when there's no gold or there's no cash in your hand. And I think a lot of people are quite scared about that now, because it feels like the rug is being pulled from underneath us, and we don't really know what to trust anymore. And with all the instability that's caused now financially from the pandemic and from food chain supplies and property prices fluctuating, climate change as well, all these earth-driven forces. I think we're in a really dangerous period where we don't know, as I said, what to trust. And that's Scorpio, isn't it? With the nodes in Taurus, Scorpio, there's so much emphasis on what we value and our money systems. And that's what most of the emphasis is about. And really it boils down to Uranus getting rid of anything that's in the path of evolution. It does break systems down. It can be innovative, and these new systems will come about. But I think many of us feel like we can't keep up with it. It's like a bull that's charging, at us in the ring, or that's escaped. And, I think that's the feeling most people have. It's okay if you know what you're doing, but it feels scary, the whole thing. But we know as astrologers that it is part of the evolutionary process. But on the downside, there could be depression even come about. I mean, financial structures could collapse. And, if this sort of thing collapses, and it possibly could, I think everything is unstable right now. Definitely with money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is, whether it's literally physically happening or it is our perception of it happening. It creates a lot of insecurity. I remember something Jeffrey Green said decades ago about the archetype of Taurus. And that is the fact that in the consensus state of consciousness, security is represented by that material world. How many zeros behind your bank account? How much material goods can you have? Individuating states of consciousness with Taurus are learning to see themselves as a resource in being able to provide and flourish for oneself. And then spirituated states of consciousness are learning to see the ultimate resource, which is universal source itself. And so, as we look at these fears and these instabilities, it's really helpful if perhaps we, can remember that the source of everything has not left us, will not leave us, will always be there. I have a slide that is not, I'm figuring out how to go back and forth here. That is out of order, but I just want to bring this slide up. Again, I told you I put a whole bunch of slides together so I could just pop back and forth around if anybody is interested. When we had the 2008 upset during Pluto's ingress into Capricorn, and we had, what did they call it? The Great Recession, I think was the term for it. I decided, oh boy, I better maybe check into financial astrology a little bit. And I found Ellen Brown, and I'm hoping you can see this book, Banking on the People by Ellen Brown. It is such a resourceful book. She's a heroine of mine. She created the Public Banking Institute. I don't know if you remember, I told you I'm from the Northern Plains, South Dakota. South Dakota and North Dakota are twins. We're both Sun and Scorpio states, Pisces moons. Anyway, North Dakota has had the Bank of North Dakota for 100 years, since 1919. And this was their solution at the time period to all what you would call loosely the robber barons in our history up here, which was the railroads and shipping all of our grains and animals, as is part of the reality here. For over 100 years, North Dakota has had its own bank that acts like a mini Fed. All of the state's assets and income stays with the bank. 750,000 people are sitting on $5 billion in cash. And everybody says, oh no, it's all the oil and the resources that go on. Well, since 2008, I've watched 2 oil downturns, and the state of North Dakota is just fine. That their mini Fed BND has a mandate to buy up the loans of the student loan debt, the farmers, the small businesses, and mortgages. North Dakota has 7 times as many banks as any other state in the US on average. I highly, highly recommend that as your Taurian fears come through with Uranus's transit there, that you look at this solution here. And Ellen goes into more detail of comparing public banking, which is, again, controlled by the public versus private shareholders or venture capitalists. She goes through all of that, and she goes through the comparisons of cryptocurrencies, and again, pros and cons. It's a wealth of information. And so there's a movement that's taking place on a grassroots level in the United States to create public banks, whether by state, county, city. For a long, long time, the province of Alberta, which is just north of us in Canada, also had a state bank. There are many countries over the years that have had state banks, and many times those were run through their postal services. And that movement is looking to. So I see that through some of the fears of the insecurities going on, not only with Uranus and Taurus, but also Pluto and Capricorn. There is hope. There are solutions. Now, I read something this morning just to show you with this cryptocurrency situation. The top 10th of 1% of owners in Bitcoin have 27% of the Bitcoin assets. So even with cryptocurrency here, in regards to Bitcoin, we still have that Pluto and Capricorn haves and have-nots. Stay tuned as we go through this nodal axis, with Uranus and the squares of Saturn, which are going to be in orb for 3 months later this year. I think it's August, September, October, in which we see that happening. We're still going to see a lot of these financial shakeups going on for us, and the need to, make all of our choices on how we would like to see things go forward as collectives, not just in the United States, but every area of the world has a private versus public banking situation and movement. I'll just let that rest for now. I'd like to move us on into the eclipses, and we're going to look at the solar eclipse that's going to be happening, as you see on your screen, April 30th. I put all of these charts for Washington, D.C. Thank you, international listeners, for allowing us to come from this perspective. I'd like to, as we move into these eclipses, invite our panel to expand the subjects besides just Uranus and resources or climate change, Pluto and our shadow world with the South Node in Scorpio. Expand on those if you'd like, but by all means, what other areas of interest do you see up for change in 2022? Mr. Eric, would you like to start us off again?
Yeah, sure. So we're just kind of open to anything. I wasn't here the last 2 days, so I don't know if we talked about the shift from the Mercury retrogrades into a new element.
Go for it.
Talked about that? Okay, I didn't know if we talked about it already. If not, it was come out. Okay.
No, we didn't. So have at it.
Yeah, so we've had them in air signs, and now we have these. We get 4 Mercury retrogrades in 2022. Admittedly, the last one is at the very, very tail end of December, but they are moving. They're shifting elements. So out of that, airy, intellectual, and I think more comfortable position for Mercury to be in, where we've seen a lot of arguing and debating. I think moving into these earth signs, and seems to be a very common and a very popular theme going on, that are mental restructuring, if you will, when they occur, are going to be related to security and stability. Mercury retrograde in an earth sign is much more uncomfortable than it is in an air sign, because it can go forwards, backwards, up, left, down, right, sideways. But in earth, it just doesn't really know how to behave. So these periods that we're going to be experiencing in these signs, I think, is going to be a bit of a dramatic shift for people. However, I think that it's going to make the Mars retrograde at the end of the year feel a little bit easier when that comes around. But I was curious what everybody's perspective was on this. I am anticipating people's feeling more concerned about their money with the retrograde in earth signs, possibly overspending, missing payments, having issues with budgeting. So listeners, you know, you really want to make sure that you're keeping your checkbook. If anybody still has those, I still use one in order, and you're watching your spending, because whenever Mercury moves into those earth signs, I see it constantly with clients, friends, and family. So I think if we're just a little bit more aware that, hey, this is a time to kind of slow down financially and piggyback off of Uranus and Pluto, where we're restructuring our values, it can be a very productive time, unless we kind of get caught up in the momentum of the retrograde itself. So.
Good point, Eric. I'm going to go to a different slide that I have right now, just to continue your discussion a little bit with the Mercury retrogrades. I know the first panel spoke some about the Venus retrograde. Venus goes stationary retrograde on Pluto. You see the three conjunctions in red on your screen. But this first Mercury retrograde that we have coming up in January of Aquarius and goes back to the latter part of Capricorn, Mercury goes stationary direct on Pluto. And so when I saw those two retrograde cycles with these, you know, conjunctions to Pluto 3 times each, it was kind of like, whoa, okay, this puts a real seriousness to the beginning of 2022. I also thought, well, you know, maybe if we want to do those New Year's resolutions, we might actually have that Capricornian energy to, you know, follow through and hit some of those, you know, goals of our resolutions. And so just wanted to point it out for any listeners that we'll be pretty active with Pluto here as we go through the first few months of 2022. And so I'll take us back to the eclipse chart that I had here. Thank you, Eric. Any other comments on the solar eclipse we got coming up, or even we have the lunar eclipse here in May? And, you know, I just think every single eclipse is just going to be activating Uranus throughout the year, which may be why our panel is concentrating on it a little bit here. But any other comments, Eric?
Not on the elemental switch of Mercury. On the eclipses, I have to admit, I would love to speak to them. I have not spent enough time really looking at them, seeing if they're aligned with any fixed stars. I pay really close attention if an eclipse falls on a fixed star. So, and I haven't checked, and I even checked the minor ones. But so I unfortunately don't have much to share on the eclipses.
Hey, fascinating topic to come back to EA Zoom next spring, or this spring, as we get closer to these eclipses, and share with everybody on that. Thank you.
Oh, I just wanted to say about the eclipses, yeah. The first of this series of eclipses in Taurus, Scorpio, started actually on November 19th with the eclipse at 27 Taurus, the lunar eclipse. Of course, it's going backwards, and that one's at 10 Taurus. There's a lot of emphasis on the degrees between 9, 10, 11. The last slide you showed, 12th of March, showed, I think it was, wasn't it, Mars was in Aquarius, squaring Uranus. Was it 10 or 11? Anyway, a 12 maybe of Taurus. So there's so much emphasis on this. And I just wanted to say one thing about the planetary nodes, you know, that Jeffrey talks about, and obviously Dane Rudger talked about. And I just wanted to point out that that during the world wars, I mean, this has been, this pandemic is like a global war. It is a war against the pandemic. That's the first time since the world wars of the 20th century that the whole world has been battling one enemy or two enemies, probably more secret enemies, but anyway. And so it's interesting that these eclipses and Uranus placements and Saturn as well, obviously, has been squaring from Aquarius, have been passing this the nodes of Neptune, the planetary nodes of Neptune, and they're going back and forth, and now the eclipses are going to go across it as well. Anyway, so this configuration has something to do with the start of World War I. I'm not saying there's going to be another world war. I mean, we are under threat, possibly, of conflicts, possibly world conflicts simmering at the moment between Russia and China, unfortunately, and other countries, and hopefully they will not amount to anything, but we're in the most dangerous situation we've been since those world wars. And so it depends, I think, on our consciousness, whether we can rise above that. Hopefully this time we can. We can go the Aquarian way, which, as you said, we're being pushed towards, it would seem, the community, the world community. We have to be seen as one, I think, as you said, Michael. So anyway, we're at the bend. So Uranus and Saturn and the eclipses, and that eclipse in April is at bendings, which is, I think it's the southern bendings, isn't it? When it's in Taurus, and that means it's obviously squaring the north node and south node of Neptune, which is 9 degrees to, I think it's just over 13 degrees Aquarius. And at the start of World War I, Uranus was actually, hold on, let me check my details here. No, Neptune, Uranus, okay. So the World War I began on the 3rd, 4th of August, 1914. And the sun, obviously, in August was at 13 degrees Leo, and conjunct the north node of Neptune. Yeah, it's difficult. All these figures. Anyway, so Neptune was in Aquarius, actually conjunct its own north node, 9 degrees Aquarius, and the sun was there opposing, obviously. That started the First World War off. Then, amazingly, at the end of the Second World War, because obviously they were just bookends, just 2 chapters of the same war, really, with an interval in between. And so at the end of 1945, again, a bomb ended, the nuclear bomb dropping. In August 1945, the sun again at 13 Leo, conjunct the north node of Neptune, conjunct Pluto that time, which had gone at the start. In fact, it entered 0 degrees Leo at the start of the Second World War, and it was at 10 degrees Leo, conjunct the north node of Neptune. So we've had a similar pattern in Capricorn with Uranus and Pluto and Saturn as well in the lead up to this period with the pandemic. What, as I say, I think, that indicates is that we have a chance, because there's always a chance to become conscious. And we seem like we are doing, even the climate change is pushing us more together, realizing we're one world this time. So there's hopefully a very great chance that we will have learned that lesson. And this time we will take that on board. But it's still a very precarious period we're going through. There might be some near misses. But anyway, I just wanted to bring the planetary nodes of Neptune into that, since they configure. And maybe that's because of the age of Pisces, and of course Aquarius, in Aquarius, that brings both those ages together, something to do with that. And that was what I wanted to say about the eclipses.
Sure. Thank you, Michaela.
I would like to add a little bit to this. Now, looking at the North Node lunar eclipse chart, of course, we see
Lunar.
Yeah,
Right.
lunar. I was looking at the lunar, North Node lunar eclipse. if we're looking at that South Node in Scorpio, of course, we see the moon is there, and the moon really is our biological karma. It's what we have inherited from our ancestors and from our prior lives, individually and of course collectively. So we're of course dealing with collective karma, our past. We know we're doing that. We know that everything that is up now for us to heal came from our past, came from past actions, whether they were one lifetime ago or 50 lifetimes ago. It's all on the table. What I want to point out is that there is that trine with Neptune and with Mars. That is a positive. The reason that I want to say that is because if we descend into this underworld in fear, it will be a lot more traumatic for us as humanity. If we can utilize that Neptune and that Mars, excuse me, well, then we can start to work with visioning, with what it is we want for ourselves, what it is we want to heal. If we go to, if we use the Mars, which is, of course, the planet of being a warrior, but it's a warrior this time in Pisces. So if we're using that energy properly, then we can descend into the underworld, which is where we're being taken, with the realization of what it is we are trying to do, which is to heal our biological karma. If it is, if we do that, then we know why we're there, and we're there to purify. If we do that, then we don't suffer as much, because in Buddhism, we're always taught that pain is something that we all have and will experience, but suffering is optional. We do not have to suffer going into the underworld, which is where we're being taken, of course, if we hold on to not just that, why we're there, but utilizing Neptune. And Neptune, of course, is the sign of spirituality. It is the spiritual planet. I'm sorry, not sign, but, and of course, we have Pisces, which we know is a sea of consciousness. It's the ocean of consciousness. So we don't want to get lost in the shadow side, of course, of Pisces, but in the true Piscean energy. So we call on higher power, whatever it is we want to believe in, and we start using that as our foundation, so that when we get these shocks from Uranus, when we get the realizations from Mercury, when we're faced with our shadow, we can stand face to face with it rather than running from it. We cannot run from this, but we can heal from it if we face it head on and we face it without fear. And the way I'm looking at this, because we've got in America, of course, we've got Pluto in the first house. It's also, it's a sextile, of course, with that South Node. And it is well aspected with the North Node. So we are being asked to do that Pluto work. It's not going to be easy, of course, because we have the square to Saturn, but that means we just have to do the work. But as long as we know the intention of the work, which comes from the Pisces, the Neptune Pisces and the Mars Pisces, of course, even bringing in Jupiter, even though that's pretty wide, we, all of us individually and collectively, can do this work and come out on the other side of it healed and operating more in that Taurian fashion, which is a simplicity that we, of which Taurus is. So that's what I wanted to add to that.
Thank you, Marie.
Mm.
Michael, do you have a preference on which chart, or do you want to look at both? Unmute Michael, please. Michael.
Sorry. I just want to go off on what Marie and what Michaela was saying, that about the element of fear. And I just want to remind everyone that back in the early 60s, there was a rather global fear and global awareness of a possible, very possible nuclear war between Russia and the US. You know, most of us will remember the hiding under the desks and all that, you know, these practices. But not only was there a fear of that, there was a very active nuclear testing, thousands of bombs going off by US, Russia, China, France, UK. And so, you know, what was very interesting back then, Uranus was in Virgo. And so here it is, you know, we're talking about Uranus going, you know, into Taurus. So this coming around in another Earth sign. And so, you know, there's this incredible fear around COVID. There's, you know, it's interesting because the fear is about the virus itself and being sick and dying and all that. And then there's the fear of vaccinations and the possibilities of what could happen from that. And, you know, once again, it's the fear element that is driving society in a big way. You know, it's not I mean, yeah, the fear is about the vaccines or about the viruses, but it's more of the fear itself that is separating people. So once again, I'm coming back to Uranus as being a divisive element. The highest aspect of Uranus in doing such a thing, though, would be to you know, help drive people into, you know, through an experience like this, driving into an experience of, you know, feeling of oneness or feeling of being able to see many points of view and trying to establish, you know, a more of an objective reality rather than taking sides.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Michael.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, it's just reminding me, touching in on COVID a little bit. In evolutionary astrology, the archetype of Uranus, Aquarius, the 11th house, contains the concept of contagion and literal contagion, which would be the massive spread of a virus. But we also can look at it as being emotional, mental, or spiritual contagions as well. And, you know, we've just seen this passage of Jupiter through Aquarius. We have seen Saturn in Aquarius, and we have another year to go yet with Saturn in Aquarius, as we can see on our screens. And so I ponder the possibility that we'll have another year with this virus as we finish up Saturn's transit through Aquarius. And as you can see here with both of these eclipses, it's square the nodes of the moon. Its exact square is April 11th at about 23 degrees Aquarius Taurus, Scorpio, of course. And, when Saturn squares the nodes, will we see a turning point with the spread of the virus? Will we see something accentuated and emphasized, for instance, another variant that comes through? The deep unknown is, as these viral mutations take place, we don't know if it's going to get weaker or stronger. It could go either direction. But as I think some of our panelists have stated, it is an opportunity to really recognize that we are not separated by geographical boundaries, no matter how much we want to play at that situation. We're the global village, Aquarian age coming upon us here over this next century. The global village is being born one way or another, no matter what we look at. So it would be my intent that as we address the fears of Taurus and Scorpio, and as it's accentuated through these eclipses, we can move through it. We can, recognize that we will survive better together. I know that Sue and Robin had stated that we would take a little bit of a break as we move through, and I'm wondering, would this be a good time to give ourselves a little break before we come back and finish up?
Sounds
Sure.
good.
Yeah.
All right. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are going to start in with the second half of the third panel on the 2022 forecast. My name is Kim Marie, and I have with me Michael, Michaela, Marie, and Eric. M's rules the world, huh? Today. And so we were talking about the eclipses, and we looked at the North Node eclipse season a little bit, and we have allowed ourselves to kind of wander a little expansively on various subjects. I'd like to, I do have a chart drawn up for the day that Mars conjuncts Uranus with the North Node, and then I have the two eclipse charts for later this year. So I think I will start with those charts, and we'll kind of continue on and take it from there with everybody. And so allow me just a moment to share my screen with you all. And I'm going to go back to the rest of, oh, here we go. Here is the Mars conjunction to Uranus with the North Node as we are looking at this one on our screen. And while we still have those outer planets sandwiched between Pluto and Uranus, the Mars-Uranus conjunction finds all the inner planets on the opposite side of the chart, and kind of everything out there all over the place. I would just like to invite the panelists who would be interested in giving us some comments and some of your thoughts on how we are going to work with Uranus on the North Node when Mars enters that picture. And of course, if there's anything else that you see in planetary configurations that you want to look at, you're most welcome to include those as well as we move through next year. Panelists, do we have anybody who is sparking with any thoughts or ideas?
Well, I know we talked a little bit about this earlier in terms of, Uranus and Taurus and, Mars and the node being a trigger for this. I think that it's that what we could expect to see, especially if we were to put this on a 90-degree dial and look at the world axis against the 0 degrees area mark, that this summer is going to be particularly violent for a lot of Earth-related weather phenomenons, whether they be tornadoes that are pulling up clouds of dust and sand and earth, or, you know, we're having tremblings and earthquakes. I mean, we've got that fiery energy of Mars, the unexpected nature of Uranus, and then the node, which is, you know, fate and destiny, and really just kind of is a cosmic point. I do always like to say, even in my work with clients or when I'm writing articles or teaching, the second I try and predict anything with Uranus, it's going to completely fall apart. So now that I put it out there, our world is probably safe. But I do think that what we can say with absolute certainty is that we should expect some of that. I do worry about the mental health of the world with this Mars Uranus North Node, because the North Node, we all know, is kind of where we're reaching for, where we're headed, and we've got the frustration and the chaos of Mars and Uranus. And with what we've been talking about already this afternoon, this evening, you know, where everybody else is, whereas everybody is in their time zones, I think that this is going to be, can also be a turning point of kind of snapping, where we're looking at more aggression over the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere, winter months in the Southern Hemisphere. So I mean, just kind of globally, you know, that's what I'm seeing, you know, whether it manifests as protests or wars, or the threatening of wars or invasions. It's difficult to say without looking at the chart of every nation, but I do expect violence at the end of the summer with this in one way or another.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah,
I'd like, yeah. Oh, okay.
Go ahead. No, Marie, your turn, honey.
You know, to add to what Eric has just said, if we look at the ruler, of course, Venus and Mars are working together, of course, but this is a young energy when we look at sextiles. It's like young lovers, so they can certainly be impulsive, and it's not a mature energy, is what I'm trying to say here. In addition to that, when I look at Venus is actually under stress, because, you know, she is technically opposed by Pluto. So I can see where, you know, there's going to be some tremendous pressure on all of us with this Mars. I mean, Mars is, of course, you know, it can be really volatile, because Mars does not necessarily think before he acts. He just acts. And, you know, we can certainly get a lot of Earth shifts, and, you know, and it's definitely going to be intense. But I see where Venus is definitely trying to help here. You know, Venus in Cancer, but she, in my opinion, is weakened in her ability to actually help because of that opposition to Pluto, which, you know, that's going to be pretty intense. So that's what I wanted to add to that.
Thank you, Marie. I find it interesting just to point out for listeners, you know, here we are drawing up a chart for August 1st, and we still have Saturn within orb of squaring the nodes of the moon. And when we have that Taurian conjunction going on, we just happen to have Mercury over there in late Leo, opposing Saturn, squaring the nodes itself. So there's a few trines to relieve energy, but there's still, you know, a lot of tension coming from all of the planets as they are trying to figure out how to interact and relate to each other. Michaela or Michael, would either one of you like
Yeah,
to?
I would like to add something. I think that what Eric was saying about it being a season for protests and maybe violence and all that, I think that more than likely will be true. But I want to add that, seeing that the Uranus, Mars, and the North Node are all conjunct and squaring Saturn and Mercury, that on the other side, or another perspective, and maybe part of the conflict, is that there are those who are coming up with new creative ideas and really wanting to put them into practicality, okay? And that the conscious will of Mars will come into play, so I don't want to forget that there are a lot of people who are working positively in the world, and they too will be activated, I guess you could say, during this time. And so, with all of what's been happening in the world and what will be happening especially this next year or two, that it won't, there'll be a lot of seemingly black and white issues, but the situation is not truly black and white. And that it is usually a mix, Jeffrey has often given examples of how people will react. He'll give sort of like, it's either this way or this way, positively, negatively, but then the majority of people are going to be in the middle, right? And I think this is really true. A lot of the people who are in the middle may be too afraid to do anything, but this is part of, I think that all the situations of the world, what everyone has spoken about so far, it's awakening everyone. And even those who are a bit afraid, they're becoming more aware. Even in as much as I don't, how should I say? I don't know about respect is not quite the right word, but politicians in general, I don't give much truck to. But there is a bastion of people who are really trying hard to push things through to a much more humanitarian way of being, even though it's the system that is in the United States, for instance, it's rife with all kinds of problems. But there's something really moving forward towards something that, they're always portrayed, even though they portray themselves as looking back to FDR, that sort of thing. But what we're really looking at is something much more for the common good, right? And I guess just my main thought on this is that there will be strong-willed people working for the good during this time also, even though everything may seem like it's going to hell in a handbasket.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate those comments. Michaela?
Yeah, I agree. There seems to be a lot of creativity in the chart. Mercury is the focal point of a yod between Pluto and Neptune, and it rules the 5th house, Gemini, creativity, communications as well, creative communication. The 8th house, Virgo, it rules as well. So it's born out of necessity, and yes, there are extremes going on of ideologies and polarities, and friction and some fear, but a lot of right brain, as you were saying, Michael, creativity is being nurtured and seeded from all of that. And also the moon is trying to Pluto, and it's the ruler of the 6th house, containing Venus, sextiles, as Marie said, to those planets, the Mars and the Uranus and the node, and it rules them. It rules the node. Yeah, I think there's so much positivity there that's under the surface, that's coming through, but it's caused by the friction. It's being engendered by the trauma, by the, yeah, it's being dug up and plowed, and yeah, so yeah, I agree with that.
Thank you, Michaela. I think what we'll find when we get to the summer of 2022, for those of us who live in the United States, we're going to be in the heat of what we call our midterm elections. While our presidential election is only once every 4 years, we have congressional elections with our House of Representatives every 2 years. And typically about a third of our senators are up for re-election every 2 years. They have 6-year terms. And so there'll be a lot of heat going on in regards to conversations and let's say campaign slogans on what we would like to do with this country and going forward. We spoke briefly on our break that we might bring in the US charts and some of the Pluto returns. Before I get to that, though, as I've been listening to the other panelists, something sparked for me with the South Node in Scorpio. This is something that I came across. Here I go again with my slides, everybody. This is something I came across about 6 months ago. And how familiar with the primary water cycle. You know, we're very familiar with the atmospheric one and how the clouds make rain, or we have tornadoes and hurricanes. But we also have primary sources of water that come from deep within the earth. And as you look at the slide, you can see the blue veins that come all the way up. This is a slide put out by an organization called the primarywaterinstitute.org. And I would invite you to go there. And so this is an organization that is really trying to help us recognize that there's another choice for clean, fresh water, in addition to desalination plants that we are starting to talk about as well. You know, Uranus in Taurus brings us to, again, how do we do that physical survival? And that South Node in Scorpio works to not only go emotionally deep, but it can react with Taurus and take water emotionally deep. And so there is this whole concept of drilling primary water wells rather than drilling wells into our aquifers. And if you are familiar with the Oglala aquifer that exists all through the northern plains in the middle of the United States, from the north to the south, we in farming practices have just really, really drained that. Well, there are a lot of primary sources of water that we can drill for that will not require us to go any deeper than we would with the aquifers. And the big thing about primary water sources is they're regenerable. They're never ending. And so when I came across this a few months, and of course you can see in red down on your screen, there's an article on it. There's my heroine, Ellen Brown again, but from public banking. She's the one who introduced me to this. It made me have a sense of hope through the chaos and hope through any climate change events or any of the violence that may take place in our country this year with all of these planets in the fixed quadrants of, this, against each other, so to speak. So I thought I would just spread the word a little bit in regards to these primary water cycles and invite you all again to check this out for yourself. And that innovation of Mars and Uranus in Taurus, drilling into the earth to bring up water, that Taurian Scorpion nodal axis. Stay tuned. I hope that we hear more about this in the public as time goes by. And so, again, we had talked a little bit about bringing up the charts, bringing up the chart for the United States. I would like to move us to the Sibly chart. I feel like we cannot neglect the US Pluto return. It has to be every day of our 3-day panel into 2022. And so I put up the Sibly chart, and I would invite the panelists who work with the Sibly chart to perhaps give us some comments and thoughts on how you see this US Pluto return, not only in 22, but leading up to it and moving forward through the rest of the decade, if you want. With Eric, you use the Sibly chart, correct?
I do. But before we dive into this, your discussion on water just made me think of something that I wanted to share that I hadn't considered. Considering those oppositional aspects, the fixed signs and the water, it got me thinking of that. Not exactly sure what it's called. I think it's a Doomsday Arctic shelf thing that's on the verge of collapsing. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but I got a chill in my spine, and I'm like, ooh, I'm wondering if we're going to see some activity there from this Uranus Mars with that and that kind of fixed water, which I associate with ice. So
yeah, good point. I think is it the Arctic or Antarctica where this big ice shelf is getting ready to break off? And when it does, I can't remember how much it's going to raise the sea levels, and even faster than anything science has said up to this point.
Yeah, it'll be big, and I can't remember which one it is, but like I said, it just hit my mind while you were talking about that.
Sure. Any of our other panelists know whether, is it Antarctica Doomsday?
It's the Arctic.
Arctic? Okay, so up north, and that's a good point to bring up, Eric, because we could definitely see that breaking off and creating major changes on the planet in a short period of time. Thank you for that, but carry on, Eric. Anything else besides the US Pluto return that's clicking for you?
No, that was it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's dive into the US Pluto return a little bit. And like I said, I've got the Sibly chart up here. So you use that chart, Eric. And how have you been pondering through this?
So, I mean, I have been with something as rare as a Pluto return, I mean, unless we go back historically, it's very difficult to find countries or nations that have gone through these. So we kind of have to poke around in the dark a little bit. But from what I have observed with larger transits, Saturn outward, slower transits, should I say, not larger. It's really in the separating aspect where we really start to see things happen. So, I mean, this has certainly been building. We can see the frustration and the breakdown in our values as a nation, what is important to us. I mean, very second house. I mean, people think go kind of straight to money, and I'm certain that is going to be a thing. But our values being pitted against one another are I hate to say the word under attack, because I don't think it's under attack. It's going through growing pains. I mean, the United States was founded as a great experiment in living in a new and exciting way. And I'm certain that this Pluto return is going to dramatically shift that. I don't know that it's going to be like boom overnight, when the aspect hits. I think that we're going to see it beyond 2022, but I think that this is going to be a really kind of key year to really get a taste and flavor for what that's going to look like. Now, because this is also it's in general opposition to our sun, the core of our being as a nation, being very kind of Cancerian. I'm very curious to see if this is going to shift and provide for changes to our Constitution, because that is the foundation of our values and what's important to us in the US. And I think that is going to be something that we're going to see in the coming years that's probably going to be triggered within the next year or so. More specifically, this chart has been very active, and we just had the eclipse on the natal ascendant of the US chart at that 12 Sagittarius, which has, in mundane astrology is the immediate environment of a nation. So that eclipse is just kind of amplified the COVID cases here, I think, in the country. And that just happened a couple of weeks ago. So, we're going to be feeling that eclipse for at least another 6 months. And that Pluto returns in the middle of that. So interestingly enough, I just saw that federal student loans are going on deferment for another couple months that were supposed to start again in January. But I'm presuming that this, with the ascendant and the second house ruler, immediately this is going to be hugely related to money, which we're seeing with no matter what side of the aisle you're on. Everybody is aware of the budget reconciliation, Build Back Better, etc. It's a discussion on spending, and are we going to revolutionize the way that we approach spending on and investing in our nation? So is it important to invest in the education of young children? Is it important to invest in clean energy? Important to invest in healthcare and elder care and home care for people? And that Pluto is really kind of challenging those things. And the eclipse certainly hasn't helped. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But what I think we need to collectively, as a nation, and by extension the world, is to kind of come to terms with that we're at the point where our country is no longer going to be the America of our parents and our grandparents and our grandparents' grandparents. It's shifting, it's changing. And because of that, the world is going to change. I think this is a time where our country is going to be stepping back, whether it's because of our own financial issues with the Pluto return, but to no longer be that global and world superpower. That's going to be something that's going to be very hard for many people in America to give up, because you've got that whole "we are America," boom, boom, boom. And it doesn't have to be that way, and it's not going to be that way anymore. And I think that it's going to be a lot easier if we just kind of accept that it's time for our country to shift and change, as opposed to trying to fight it. Of course, people will fight it, and that's probably where we're going to see more of the aggression and the protests and the fighting and all that other fun stuff. But like with any transit, like I tell a client, you can go with the flow with it, or you can fight it. You're going either way. So, the choice is up to you to go kicking and screaming, or to learn to adjust with the rhythm. But this is just kind of what I've been paying attention to in my own beliefs here in my tiny little corner of the world of what's to expect with this. So
Thank you, Eric, very much. Marie, you use the Sibly chart?
Yeah, I do. I use this chart, and of course, from my perspective, this is definitely about what we value. When we look at when Pluto, the original chart of 1776, I look at this and say, okay, so what were we dealing with in 1776? What were our values? What were we willing to fight for? And now, with Pluto coming back around, of course, the question is, did we achieve the goal? And if we didn't achieve the goal, what's left on the table for us to do to achieve the goal? I mean, if we look at that Sag ascendant, that is, of course, aspirational. It is pointing the arrow to a goal and shooting it and achieving the goal. Now, of course, in 1776, we were dealing with wanting to be free, basically. But what does freedom mean? What is freedom? So we had issues on the table back then, slavery, of, how the Native Americans were treated, women's belief systems, and, being subservient and that. When I look at this particular Pluto return, I see it beginning when Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008. And of course, we had the economic collapse. So this is what we're being shown is our shadow, what it is we have left to work on. And we're also being shown what we have accomplished, because we've accomplished a lot that is positive in when we think about 1776. It hasn't all been dire and doom and gloom. But what we have done is what we have valued. We haven't necessarily, we're not valuing people. We're valuing money and things, whereas that is only, and we're valuing people in the sense that people are the raw materials to create wealth. And all of this is not true, what we should actually truly be valuing. Things. We need to value people. So all of this is on the table. The system, Pluto has been tearing down and showing us what we have to work on, what mountain we need to climb. Because of course, Pluto is, Capricorn is the mountain goat. So we're climbing the mountain basically just to find out whether or not there is a pot of gold at the top of that mountain. And what we have been doing since 1776 is climbing this Capricorn mountain and finding, in some cases, fool's gold. We're not getting any soul infusion from the fool's gold. We're not finding the real gold of what we value and our self-worth. And so I see this time as basically an awakening of what it is we need to work on in Aquarius. We need to, because Pluto will be going into Aquarius, and that is where the deep work will actually take place, the purification, I should say, when we start valuing the collective, when we start valuing what will help us to elevate our consciousness. So that's how I see this. And of course, Pluto did oppose our sun. And we know that when Pluto opposes the sun, it's about our ego. And we have been, of course, doing a lot of ego serving since 1776. And all of that has to change because it doesn't serve us. We do know that with this transit of Pluto, a lot of times it takes it takes a long time for us to even know what it is, what the change is, because we're still in the midst of changing. We're still in the midst of going into the underworld so that we can do this purification. So this is a tremendous time for us. And as Eric said, we will be helping to change the world, because this country is, or we don't know if we will continue to be, I doubt if we'll continue to be a world power. I don't think that we're going to collapse. I do believe that we are going to shift into being more aware of the group as being vital and important. And we're going to get to a higher level of consciousness with Pluto. Because remember, Pluto also is where all the buried treasure is held. Pluto being the god of the underworld. So we dig, which is what we're doing, and we will get to our treasure. But that's not going to be with Pluto in Capricorn. That's probably not going to be for a while, probably not even with Pluto in Aquarius. But that's the way I see this Pluto return.
Mhm.
And it is going to be hard.
I think that was beautifully put, Marie. And another thing that I think is interesting to note is that our founding fathers, their natal Plutos, they're going to be sharing their natal Plutos with the new sets of senators and leaders in the US in the coming years. They're actually already starting to enter politics with like Alexander, AOC. I never comes out of my mouth right. And I think that's pretty fascinating as well to see and watch. And then in typical Neptunian fashion, it's never seen. Everybody seems to forget that we're in the middle of the Neptune opposition during this Pluto return as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a long time before we actually see who we are becoming.
Yeah, and I think it's going to shift from that Capricornian, we have to be successful. It's that American dream is about success when it really should just be about happiness. But you know, we see that unlike any other country in the world, we don't take vacation, we don't relax, we work when we're away. That's what we value. We value success. We value very Capricornian things.
Oh yeah, yeah. We saw that with the. I read an article about what happened at the candle factory. I believe it was in Kentucky, where the people wanted to, you know, a storm was coming, and from what I understand, the bosses said, if you leave, you will probably be fired. So what are we valuing? What, you know, it's the product, not the people. That has to be changed, and it will be.
Totally. Thank you both. Really, really appreciate that. I want to reach out to Michael. Michael's from the United States, even though you're living in Ecuador now. Do you work with the US chart anymore, Michael?
Yeah, I do. And I just saw something on here, and it just reminds me, you know, back at the last US election at 2:30 in the morning, I wrote a thing, astrological write up on the election, focusing on Trump. and what I see here is very interesting too, because Uranus, as it goes into the US's 6th house later next year in July, and then the following year, Uranus goes into Trump's 10th house. And it's going to be starting to conjunct the North Node, well, where the North Node is now, but it'll be in the 6th house. And what I see with that is that this may be controversial to some people, but he's going down. And when he goes down, you know, it's just not about him personally, but he represents a lot. He's a huge symptom of things. And this will be the beginning of, you know, 6th house, a Virgoic healing of the country, and which will help lead towards what Marie was just talking about. You know, the taking on the attitude of, you know, we're just one country amongst everyone else, and how to cooperate a bit more.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Michaela, I want to reach out to you from France. Do you ever look at a chart for the US?
Yeah,
Or
well, I was on the election panel in the Zoom last year. So not last year. Was it so long ago? Was it last year? Yeah. Seems ages. But yes, so I do. I lived in America for a few years, 7 years as well. So so yeah, just to say too, what Michael was saying before about the Bay of Pigs, the crisis in 61, and Neptune was actually at the bendings then of the Neptune planetary nodes. So we're getting, so it's, since then it's the first time we're sort of getting that again, and maybe there will be a crisis with China, Russia, maybe both. Although America, yeah, the age of empires is over because it doesn't fit into the Aquarian age anyway. I think America will take on a new style. I mean, it's heavily, you know, with the Aquarian moon and the South Node in Aquarius, and obviously with those the nodal axis with in Aquarius, Leo, in the First and Second World War again, and in the Bay of Pigs, you know, America was forefront into with winning the wars. And you know, since its inauguration, since it was founded, it has been a pinnacle of freedom, although obviously, you know, it's been a bit hypocritical with that, with slavery and all that's coming out now. So we're looking at all of that. But then so has every country in the world. I mean, you know, the whole world has been hypocrites. And empires did that sort of thing. They exploited human beings all over the world, but that's over too. So I think the fact that the North, the nodes are in the 12th house, as you said, I think Marie and Eric and Michael, you know, it's going down into the unconscious. It's what's in the unconscious, what's being excavated necessarily again, and really emphasizes America's chart, because America is the superpower and has been, but now, yeah, Russia and China might be vying. I'm sure they would vie for that position, but it will fail because it's the age of Aquarius again, and no country is going to be the superpower. It has to be a more even playing field. And America predictably will take on that, that stance as, again, the holder of you know, the democratic, along with some other countries, nations, of course, but the holder up of democracy against oppression and fascism and communism, which failed, obviously. In fact, communist countries won't survive in that stance in the Aquarian age. That can't happen. So it's as though we do have to go through a final seeing to uproot all of that, because it doesn't fit into the new world that will eventually emerge, although not in our lifetimes, in another lifetime, obviously, when we're back. But yeah, it's funny too how that Mars Uranus conjunction, it was right on the 6th house, 18 degrees Taurus. And also, yeah, what was there? Yeah, it was that there was a really nice, what did I think? Oh yeah, of course, the transiting nodes are, although they're in the 12th and the 6th, you know, the 12th being the unconscious, but going towards conscious service in the 6th, Taurus, and then making a square to the moon, yeah, but a sextile and a trine to Pluto, as well as the Pluto return. So I think it looks very positive. Yeah, no more superpowers anyway, so no one's going to be. Take that.
Oh, thank you. I just
Okay.
read an article in Atlantic magazine, one of their latest issues about the bad guys are winning, and it had Russia and the leader of Bulgaria and Brazil and some of these more autocratic leaning countries, and how they have just been suppressing that Aquarian age activism and a better equality. And so I think in general with the last full year that Pluto is in Capricorn, it goes into Aquarius, retrogrades into Capricorn, 2 retrograde cycles, 23, 24. But this is 22 is the last full year of Pluto in Capricorn. So I think that's a flavor. And then I think that the whole transiting Pluto balsamic, the US Pluto, regardless of the time, July 4th, it's the last gasp of the old world empires trying to hold on to the change and the diversities that are coming for us, and especially with the younger generations. It's going to be very interesting to see how this goes. I remember Jeffrey Green 3 decades ago talking about the US Pluto return and going, it will be the US fall from grace, and they're going to have to learn how to play with others in the sandbox. And so I'm just going to share a few comments from my perspective. And okay, hold on a second. I got to get another chart. I think it is this one right here, and I'll give you some background on this. I've been looking at this chart time for a couple of years now. Before I go to that though, I just want to point out that regardless of which chart you use, in general, all the July 4th charts have the only 2 retrograde planets, Mercury and Pluto, opposing each other. And of course, Pluto has been busy with Neptune transiting Pluto. And then we have that Sun in Cancer square Saturn in Libra. And we have Mars in Gemini square Neptune in Virgo. So regardless of what houses you put this opposition and 2 squares in, it all comes down to this theme over the history of the United States, especially the last 250 years, of being inclusive versus exclusive. This is a term that goes very deep with evolutionary astrology. Inclusive, giving, sharing, and including. Exclusive, excluding, taking, and hoarding. And so the history of our country has had ways where we include people and ways where we exclude. And obviously, as we're approaching this first US Pluto return, we have this whole theme of, do we include all groups or exclude? Really in our faces, that we have to, take a long, strong, deep look at this as a collective soul and how we want to see ourselves. And you can look at it with political energies, you can look at it with healthcare, children, elder care, the resources. Take your theme, and all of them are really having to go back and forth between these inclusive principles or exclusive principles. And it is my, sincere hope, intent, and prayer that, the inclusive perspective and principles will actually have the last word as we, go forward into this second cycle as a collective group of people. Michael Munkasey, or Munkasey, however it is pronounced, I could not find a website for him, but about 3 years ago or so, he wrote an article in NCGR about his research, and he used 20 different time periods. And of course, you know, as some of our astrological researchers do, you know, you program all these events over periods of time and see where the bells and whistles go off. He, in his research, he has found this 9:37 a.m. date to work, which of course gives us a fifth house Pluto. Two things. First of all, the first time I spoke in public on this chart last fall, I was in Los Angeles speaking at an expo. And as I talked about the egotistical nature of the United States, having a fifth house Pluto on stage, there was an earthquake. And I'm like, oh, Pluto, thank you. I guess you're giving me a little tidbit here, heads up. But in Munkasey's research, back in 1989, the Library of Congress published a new group of letters that were found, written by Benjamin Franklin and a few other of the signers of the Direct Declaration of Independence. And in these old letters that were discovered, Benjamin Franklin is quoted as saying that he remembers signing the papers somewhere between 9 and 11 a.m. And research was pretty well established that the Continental Congress, both the first and the second one, that's the group that met in Philadelphia that, you know, came up with this whole thing. It's a fascinating article if you want to research him on NCGR's website. Anyway, they were pretty strict in the time periods that they kept. And they would start every day at 9 a.m. and they would quit every afternoon at 4 p.m. and they would not take a lunch and they would lock the doors. Nobody got in, nobody got out. And they would debate and debate and debate over this period of time, you know, 75, 76, and, you know, even beyond that a little, about what they were going to do and how they saw us and how they wanted to create things. And by the way, up to that point, the 13 colonies all had their own colonial scripts, and they all operated independently, and they didn't call themselves states, but as they had their separate little colonies, they all operated a little bit like a public bank within each of their colony. And that was another one of those battles in the early years of the United States. How are we going to create our own currency, and who's going to run it? Who's going to take care of it? I mean, that in and of itself is an interesting history. They are saying those that wanted the more public banking movement always had a history of either getting assassinated, Abraham Lincoln, or near assassinations, Andrew Jackson. And he's got a whole other history besides that. I'm only concentrating on the money. And so over time, I over the last few years, I have shifted to this chart because it just feels like the facts of research are there pretty good. No offense. Jeffrey Wolf Green, the chart I used before, had a 2:13 a.m. chart. He used that. Oh gosh, there's another astrologer that I work with who also used that chart years and years ago. That one gave the US a 9th house Pluto. And so regardless of which July 4th, 1776 chart you use, we're still going to have transiting Pluto make these 3 returns to itself. And in addition to that, here are the other things that are going on that I want to point out to you. You know, we're coming off of these 5 Pluto oppositions to that natal Mercury retrograde in Cancer. We are coming off to transiting Neptune making the last quarter squares to the natal Mars in Gemini. And we are also, working our way through the Neptune oppositions. As we all know, as astrologers, nothing happens in isolation. Everything is synergistic with everything else. Oh, by the way, in the 9:37 a.m. chart, Saturn makes 3 conjunctions to the natal US moon at about 22.5 degrees Aquarius. And so we're looking here at these outer planets being quite active in the US chart. And I just think Neptune in Pisces is as active, opposing itself and squaring Mars in Gemini, as is the Pluto return. And Neptune and Pluto, again, are shaking things up in this country. I mean, if you want to touch upon Neptune opposing itself, we look at how so much of the evangelical religious movement in the United States has almost turned into a cult worship of Donald Trump as a human being, instead of the theological principles that they espouse. We're looking at research in the United States showing less and less people identify with a formal religion, and more people identify with none of the above. And so we're, in addition to having what I'm calling a soul identity crisis going on in this country, we are having an ideological crisis in this country that is going right along with this Pluto return. Those who feel that, we're a Christian country, and I live in a very conservative state, and our governor got a bill passed a couple of years ago that made every single school district in our state put out a plaque that said, "Under God we trust." I think, as we move through 2022, and then that new phase of Pluto and Aquarius to this natal Pluto, there's a lot of disruption to come yet. I just don't think the patriarchal distortions of this natal Pluto and Capricorn will survive, because we've got to learn how to be in harmony with nature on this planet. And it's going to happen one way or another, waking us up to all of that. And I think it was Marie or Michaela that so nicely said, the empire building is over. We've got to figure out how to get along with others as equals. And I think we're going to do it kicking and screaming. However, I just see that we have to figure out how to play together in the same sandbox. Our survival as an entity, depends upon it. Just briefly, and I can easily go back to the Sibly chart for everybody, but one of the things we were asked to do, if we had time, was to speak a little bit to the Mars retrograde cycle in Gemini. Mars is going to go retrograde October 30th, late this in 22, through January 12th of 23. And Mars is going to be retrograde in Gemini from 25 degrees to 8 degrees Gemini. So regardless of which chart you use, the Mars retrograde, the end of this year, turning stationary retrograde just before the US midterm elections, Mars is going to make 3 conjunctions to itself. It's going to make 3 squares to the natal US Neptune in Virgo, as Mars is going to make 3 waxing squares to transiting Neptune in Pisces. And so I'd like to, invite our panel now to speak to the, hold on a second, I'm going to have to get myself out. I don't remember where I put the Sibly chart, and I think it's right here. Yep. So I'd like to ask panelists further thoughts on the US Pluto return, thoughts on transiting Neptune and this Mars retrograde in Gemini as we get to the latter part of this year. What's sparking for everybody?
You know, I just have a comment, and it's especially in relation to Neptune. When, you know, here in America, in any country or state or city, when we're looking at a chart, we're looking at the birth, of course, of that energy. And with America, the intention is what we have to look at. What was the intention of our forefathers? And of course, they're, you know, regardless of what was going on with them personally, I do believe that their intention was that of inclusivity. And their intention was that of seeking the holy grail or the higher grail of consciousness. And I say this because these forefathers, in my opinion, were alchemists in their own way. They were Masons. They dealt in some ways with secret knowledge. So they were utilizing that Neptune ideal for higher level consciousness, which to me, when I look at our chart and I look at our natal chart and I look at the transiting chart, it is that ideal that is, and the intention that is at play. This is where we're being led. And of course, we have the squares and the opposition, and we have the whole chart that is helping us to get there. So, you know, what do we value? What are we saying? I mean, when we're looking at the chart of the Pluto return, we see Jupiter and Neptune and the Sun, of course, all in Pisces, all in the third house. So what is the third house about? What are we telling ourselves? What story are we telling ourselves? That's pretty much what I wanted to add to what you just said, Kim Marie. I do believe that we have to look at the intention, because the intention for our forefathers is the ultimate goal. And we can't change that intention without changing the natal chart, and we can't do that, of course. We can't really, anyway, so.
Sure, I hear you. You know, we talk about a lot how, you know, the US wanted that freedom from taxation, you know, which could easily be, you know, the Pluto signature, but they also wanted that religious freedom as well, which gets, you know, very much emphasized with the Mars square to Neptune, and allowing there to be that diversity of religious freedom in this country.
Absolutely.
I agree with you on the intention of that. From my perspective, it's just a lot of consensus consciousness took that Neptune in Virgo and you know, condensed it into the classic "my God better than your God." You know, and you can definitely see that with this, you know, the Sibly chart and Neptune in the 9th house, you know, the distortions of that. But
yeah,
I agree. I think our founders had, you know, a much different intention than how we might see it being played out today.
Absolutely. And remember, we are also a young country compared to the rest of the world, and we have not individuated yet. We're still in the throes of individuation, and so it's very difficult to go into the whole or being a part of the entire group until we individuate. We know this personally in our own lives. I mean, if we, and we're looking, of course, at as Aquarius as the group, and that is where we are headed. I love that. I love our moon, which is inclusive. So how is it, what we're trying to do is, of course, be accepting of everyone's unique individuality and still be accepting of that in the entire group. Because when you look at even the Native American tribes, the way they used to be, everyone had value in the community. It didn't matter. I mean, what you did was important, regardless of if you were a weaver, a babysitter, the chief, or whatever. You had your individual job, and your individual job was supportive of the group. And I believe that is where we want to get to. We're of course not there yet, but this is what we're working towards. So,
Thank you, Marie.
mm-hmm.
Comments? Anybody else having ideas and thoughts pop up with Neptune or the Mars retrograde late this year?
Yeah, well, the Civil War was the last time Neptune was in that position, opposing Neptune in America's chart. So, and of course, Mars, T-squaring it, them, like that, and then coming to its return in Gemini. So, and Mars square Uranus, Mars square Neptune, I wrote that from somewhere, it has to do with doubt, discouragement, confronting consequences of past actions without caving into the feeling of hopelessness. That was in Book of Transits, Roberts, the famous one. My brain won't work anymore. But anyway, so confronting consequences of past actions. That's very much, where it is, in order to go on to the Aquarian, particularly when Pluto enters Aquarius, which will be obviously going towards that, the nodal axis, the south node of America's chart. And also what Marie said about the founding fathers being Freemasons, because that July 4th date was obviously chosen because that's the heliacal rising of Sirius, which is the famous chart of the Freemasons. So obviously, they had a lot of secrecy going on, but their intention was, a deeply spiritual intention. And they would have known about the age of Aquarius coming up and being, a very important date in the history of the entire world. So they would have been amazingly aware of that and would have chosen the chart accordingly. And that's interesting what you said about Uranus being on the midheaven at the other time, because Uranus was actually discovered 1781, shortly after that, interestingly, and it ends up to be the ruler of Aquarius. So it's just happening like clockwork. It's so apt, isn't it? It's beautiful.
Totally.
Difficult, but beautiful.
Michaela, you just reminded me that you're tuning into us from France. And so on behalf of those of us over here speaking in our afternoons, really, really appreciate you adjusting your personal clock for us.
Oh, thank you. No, I love it. No, it's fine. Pleased. Thank you.
You bet. Eric, I saw that you had some comments.
Oh, I always have comments. There's a lot to unpack here with this Mars retrograde. As Michaela said, it's forming that T-square, when it occurs, and coming off of the Mars return, which is going to set a 2-year kind of stage of what we're going to focus on. But, you know, Mars isn't happy in Gemini. So the fact that it's going to go retrograde in this sign, and it's so close to our election, right? Because it's the very end of October. Am I right? The 30th or the 20th or something. It's
30th.
literally, yeah, it's like literally days before the election. You know, to me, Mars retrograde in Gemini is just kind of like very verbally aggressive. You know, everything that we've been bottling up is really kind of coming out, almost like anger that we've held as well, then kind of can come out. It's just meltdowns. So, you know, we're pairing this with that Neptunian energy at the same time is going to be, I think, I hesitate to use the word catastrophic because I don't like to be a pretender of doom, but I think a lot of people's mouths are going to get them in trouble during that 10-week period where we have Mars retrograde in Gemini. It typically can for people when Mars is retrograde, but in Gemini specifically, it's really just kind of like going to be a challenge. My brain is starting to wind down, so I'm becoming a little less verbally coherent, and I apologize for that. But like she said, with the clock with the time, we got the Pluto return, the Neptune opposition, and now this Mars that's forming a T-square that's setting the two of those up, while the world itself didn't have major aspects like we did in 2021 with the Great Conjunction and, you know, the Saturn Neptune or the square. The US chart is hit very hard in 2022 as opposed to the rest of the world. But then I think it's like dominoes. When the US goes down, the rest of the world's going to go down with it. So I think a lot of the aggression and protest and anger and things that we see from the Mars's hit to the Uranus node is going to just kind of be amplified in the retrograde. And there's going to be probably a lot of truths I think are going to kind of be revealed about what was actually going on over the summer is going to come out that retrograde, and that's going to be quite aggressive and angry, and usually is right before an election. People are dropping bombs and books and all these other kinds of things, and I think it's just timed beautifully. But for everybody out there listening, maybe not have a really important conversation in November and the December, you know, try and keep this maybe till 2023.
Add October in with the pre-shadow.
Yeah.
And even, you know, Mars retrograde, even a sense of being careful with action as well as communications. You know, Mars and Gemini, 1 minute everything's okay, and the next moment the, you know, car accident or, you know, whatever else little upset could come along happens. And so it is a time period to just be kind of aware and conscious, because Neptune's going to want to be fogging it all up, you know. So thank you. Anything else? Any other comments, Eric?
Outside of, sorry, there goes my camera again. You know, bringing Neptune into that, you said it fogs it up because of the T-square. I'm thinking that watery Neptune, that dissolving kind of energy with the Mars creates this steam, and steam can be, it gets into crevices and it can burn you if you're not careful. You think about like pouring like boiled like potatoes or pasta out. So again, those accidents that you mentioned, I think are going to be sharp and direct and painful.
And we're talking both individually and collectively, as everybody gets tense here again with our midterm elections.
Yeah, I mean, just like with a Mercury retrograde, you see more cars along the side of the road broken down. I think that you're gonna see that kind of collectively increase in traffic issues and quite possibly accidents related to travel because of the Gemini. Short distance, I don't think airplanes. I think it's gonna be mostly cars and trains.
interestingly, I'm up here in the northern plains, which is, quite rural. We're finding that more and more you're having to pay attention to the weather forecast for wind speeds. We're a great place for what do you call windmills? But for instance, there was a series of really harsh accidents in Wyoming and in South Dakota. I think it was in the month of November or else early December here, where wind speeds were gusting above 80 to 100 miles an hour. And I can't remember if it was South Dakota or Wyoming, but we had like one stretch of an interstate where 15 semi-trailers got blown over on their sides. And I just think of Mars and Gemini, and I think of that retrograde cycle bringing the whole issue of just literally the wind, which with climate change is probably going to become, increasingly more of an issue with even our abilities to drive on our highways and be safe. Michael, comments?
Well, looking at this chart, I'm looking at the Mars and Venus coming up to the Pluto. And, as we know that the Pluto is the unconscious and Mars is more like the conscious will. And so it's a dual aspect, everything, that's been said about the, the uprisings, the anger, the arguments. I mean, it's all going to happen, and it will be there. And, and there will be, as I mentioned before, there will be more positive, I think, this coming year for sure. It's going to be, the darkest part of before the dawn, and, it may last longer than this year. And with the Neptune opposition to itself, third and ninth house, this, a lot of it has to do with the unclarity of what is truth, right? And it's going through that where you have the potentiality for the inherent, if you will, spirituality to really come alive. But it's going to be very confusing for a lot of people. I mean, it already is. And this provides an atmosphere for people to come into the situation and give the answers, and there'll be a lot of, I think, false messiahs, if you will, especially in the US. Or maybe it's just that everybody has an answer for something, and everybody's going to be pulled one way or the other. And with that Pluto opposition Mercury, it's part of it. There are all these ideas and thoughts and communications and really penetrating deep into unconscious areas where the the self-esteem, especially with the challenged self-esteem of the country, of we're number one kind of mentality, it's going to be challenged. And so people who are fomenting that make America great again, USA number one, blah blah blah, it's still going to carry weight for a while. And while at the same time, as I mentioned before, there are others who are coming in with new thought, so I just see pockets of people really trying to create something new. How it's all going to come out in the wash. It's going to be interesting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Michaela, did you have something?
Oh, yeah, well, just with regards to that, it's interesting because Mars went into Aquarius 0 degrees when Trump won the election, and then it actually went into 0 degrees of Taurus when the insurrection started. Exactly. So it's interesting because it's going to be going into Leo, going a bit ahead, but since we're talking about it in 2024 in November. And that's shortly before Pluto, I think, goes into Aquarius for the last time. And then obviously, Pluto will be hanging around there in the inauguration the following year. So it should be interesting. I don't know if he'll run, but there should, as you just said, there'd be a lot of contention going on. And but hey, it's fate. It's all happening for a purpose. Whatever happens.
Yeah, Marie.
Yeah, to add to what has been said, which I definitely agree with. Individually, we can mitigate some of this in our lives. I mean, the effects. When we look at Mars in Gemini, just specifically, what is Mars in Gemini asking us to do individually? Because remember, each of us individually make up the collective consciousness of the US and of the world. So if we individually actively engage with that energy of, say, Mars and Gemini, and how it is affecting us with our chart, and what we want from it. You can always ask Mars what it is it wants in Gemini, because even though Mars doesn't necessarily like Gemini, it's there for a reason. There's an evolutionary intention there. And what is it asking each individual? If we are proactive with that, and even doing meditations and asking the question what we can do to engage, to be proactive, then that will assist in moving through that period of time and gaining the gifts of that particular transit. Because energy, as we know, cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. And it's a good time if we know that we can speak out of turn, if we know that we can be volatile, because Mars, can do that. If we know that what Mars needs to do, of course, is think before it acts, then why not, before speaking to someone and speaking your mind in a rude or way that is going to push somebody away, write it out. Maybe write what it is you want to say and burn the letter. That's one way of using that Mars in Gemini, but there are many ways that we can use it. So it's there for a purpose, and we just need to use it effectively, or engage in it effectively, in that energy and in all of the energies.
Yeah. Any archetype can be naturally expressed or distorted. And I think that's the opportunity that will be there for all of us. I am going to bring things down to a closure now. And so on behalf of all of our panelists for today, we thank those of you who are listening. We thank those of you who tune in at a future event. Thank you, panelists, for taking of your time to be with us as well. And so I'd like to turn it back over to Robin, who has a closing ceremony for us.
Okay, thank you. Those for sharing your insightful perspectives. It was wonderful. Now I'd like to welcome Ari Marshall and Marty Dixon as they will play some music for us while we show slideshow in celebration of the solstice and the holidays.
Cool. Can everyone hear me? All right. Hi, everyone. Hey, Marty. So here's a little song that has been sung a lot in my family. And I feel this is a really appropriate song to sing. This brings in that Aquarian vibe and just the reminders of what this life is all about. I am thankful for the truth that never goes away. I am thankful for your love that stays in me all day. I am thankful for this life, to remember what I've always been. I am thankful to be here now, to remember it all within. For we are here to sing and pray, to be full in a beautiful way. We are here to care and share the love inside, it's everywhere. For we are here to sing and pray, to be full in a beautiful way. We are here to care and share the love inside, it's everywhere. The love inside, it's everywhere. I am thankful for the truth that never goes away. I am thankful for your love that stays in me all day. I am thankful for this life, to remember what I've always been. I am thankful to be here now, to remember it's all within. For we are here to sing and pray, to be full in the beautiful way. We are here to care and share the love inside, it's everywhere. Oh, we are here to sing and pray, to be full in the beautiful way. We are here to care and share the love inside, it's everywhere. Oh, the love inside, it's everywhere. The love inside, it's everywhere. Oh, the love inside, it's everywhere. The love inside, it's everywhere.
Marty? Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay, Robin?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Ari. We're definitely here to sing and pray. And we thank everyone for your input. We thank Sue and Robin for connecting us all. And I'd just like to pay some gratitude and homage to Venus, who is our link to our ancestors, and ask everyone to send her love. It will be magnified and blessed and returned to you. So here's a little ode to Venus.
Thank you, Marty. That was beautiful. And Ari, your music was beautiful as well. And thank you to everyone who's participated and all of our members.
Thank you all.